morning. Let's talk about all things therapy with Noel McDermott, who is a psychotherapist and also founder of Mental Health Works Limited. Now, let's start with the basics, shall we? Seems an obvious place to start. For people who've never had it and don't really know what it is, what is therapy and what's it designed to do?
It's no longer one thing. So people may imagine therapy is a thing, but it's a series of what we call modalities, and different modalities are designed to do different things. So reading the Lewis's story in the BBC article, it's clear he's had what's called CBT because of the language he's using, like the word catastrophizing. So when you do CBT, you get taught certain concepts that are not helpful, unhelpful thinking patterns, they're called. And catastrophizing is one of those things that you do if you're anxious, and you learn to manage that. And catastrophizing, what it says on the tin, you take a problem and you turn it into a catastrophe that you can't cope with, and that makes your anxiety worse. So you recognize those thinking patterns, and there's some for depression as well, and so on and so forth. And then you learn to challenge those thoughts and reality test them through what's called cognitive restructuring, so that rather than winding yourself up with your own thoughts, you find new thoughts that calm you down. So it's clear he's done that. But there's a lot of different modalities now that are designed to do different things, and we can run through some of them if you want.
Yeah, and there's lots of different types, and it's sort of ever-growing field, of course. No, would I be right to say that at the root of many of them is self-understanding, is helping people, not telling people, but helping people themselves to come to a better kind of grasp of who they are and what their triggers are, ways that they think, and as you've just been talking about, way to change perhaps certain ways that they think.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to think of it is about that, but I would call it more psychological education, because I think there's a not very helpful way of thinking about it, which is part of an old style of therapy, which is tell me about your childhood. That you have to go back to your childhood. You don't. For some people you do, but for most of us we don't need to. But we do need psychological insight informed by sort of the evidence base that exists, so that we have to understand our condition, if you like. It sounds like a very cold clinical word, but it's important to understand what we're living with. And what that means is, rather than us then sitting inside our own head and thinking we're fundamentally wrong or broken, if we understand what's happening and why it's happening, we can then go, oh, right, that's pretty normal, actually. Okay, now I need to manage it. And it makes it manageable, as opposed to a personal failure or personal damage.
And lots of different types of therapy, lots of reasons that people might come forward for therapy, Noel. What's the sort of biggest change that you noticed in the people that you work with?
I think the biggest change is they get happier.
that's a pretty... You're clearly doing something simple, right.
But there you go.
There's an endorsement for you.
I was talking about it to people earlier on. I mean, I think we can tend to believe that cynicism and darkness is more intelligent or somehow desirable. I don't know how we got to that in society, but it's wrong. Simplicity, happiness, being comfortable in your own skin, and being confident that you have the skills and resources needed to deal with what life will throw at you. Those, I think, are the really strong outcomes from therapy. And so you get a good set of tools in your kit bag. And those tools are pretty much common. There's common tools like having a good support network. How radical is that?
But something that maybe people, weren't sort of prompted to think of until they...
That's right. But did you see the article with Emma Raducanu the other day? And she was talking about this new group of friends that she has around her. It's not about the coaching. It was always about her. The stories are always about her coaching, wasn't it? She's got the best coach, or it's not a very good coach, or she's training too hard. Well, actually, what she said is, I've now got a group of friends and supporters around me, and that's transforming my life. And the evidence is really clear that better that group of people are around you, the more diverse they are in terms of personality and experience and so on, the more informed they are psychologically and emotionally, and the more supportive they are, the more likely one is as an individual to be successful in life on every single level. So there's a lot of evidence for it, and it's a really strong outcome. But being psychologically informed and being kind and compassionate to oneself. Again, it sounds like something, if we talked to our grandmas, they would have told us this, right? They'd have said, start being nice to yourself.
But yeah, and yet there's still this sort of stigma around therapy, isn't there? I think there is perhaps a generational element to this as well, Noel. I don't know if you do, but a lot of people, I'm not, this nonsense. Even Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, series of interviews last weekend, I'm not into this self-reflection stuff, he said.
Yeah, well, he's clearly not.
Well, but I read that and I thought, my goodness, you're in the wrong job, because leadership requires the ability to reflect on how you perform.
I agree.
But
I agree.
I actually found that slightly troubling. But there is this sort of idea that it's just sort of, woo-woo, self-indulgent nonsense that some people have.
I think that for older generations, and I'm part of the older generation, I am definitely, but for older generations, there was a message that was given which was quite brutal and brutalising. And the reason that message was given to older generations is because there was nothing available. I'll give you an example. We've always had post-traumatic stress disorder. It's always existed, but it's not always been called that. In the First World War, that's right. In the First World War, it was called cowardice, right? Yes. And you were shot for it. Now we call it post-traumatic stress disorder. So our knowledge and understanding in this area of human existence has grown as the research has grown. In exactly the same way that when the Wright brothers built an aeroplane, these days when we build an aeroplane, it's a very different beast, because we've learned how to do it better. Yes. And that's the story of therapy, that its evidence base has grown. And now, and I think that there is still amongst the older generation a disbelief that things could be different, because actually they're quite brutalised, unfortunately.
It's funny, isn't there? We have this sort of, we think learning is a good thing. People who learn, people who read, people who want to increase their understanding of the world are praised and lauded and respected. And yet people who come forward and say, well, actually, I want help increasing my understanding of myself are sort of scorned and mocked by some people. It's very, very odd.
It's very unfortunate, but it is also, there's a psychological process going on, whereby somebody who has unprocessed stuff, is carrying unprocessed baggage, will be reactive to somebody who talks about that stuff, because they haven't learned how to talk about it themselves.
Got it.
So often what you see, and what I see, psychologically speaking, is when I see a commentator talking about this stuff, what I'm thinking is they're triggered because they can't face this stuff.
Makes complete sense. It stirs something up in them. Just finally and briefly note, obviously people who are struggling with whatever that might be are those that were probably more likely to come forward and ask for therapy. Do you think it would benefit everybody, even those that are actually pretty happy and doing well? Is it something that anybody could find value in?
All right, I'm going to make a really strong recommendation here. I have no financial gain from this book that I'm going to suggest to people, but there's a book called Mind Over Mood, which is the standard CBT text that everybody uses. If you go and learn how to do CBT as a therapist in the NHS, you'll be given that book. I'm going to encourage everybody to go and buy it and learn about it. That will vastly improve your life.
Even if they think, I don't need that, I'm perfectly happy and I'm loving life.
It doesn't matter. The life skills it gives you in it are not about treating an illness. The life skills it gives you in it are about enhancing your well-being and enhancing your performance and your capacity with yourself and with other people.
Sounds good to me. Might go and buy that one. Noel, thank you very much for talking to us this morning. Noel McDermott, psychotherapist, founder of Mental Health Works Limited.